Hello and welcome to Cyber Focus, your source for international business information. My name is Tim Smith and our guest today is Philip Powell. Phil Powell serves as Associate Dean of Academic Programs here at the Kelley School of Business, where he manages the Kelley School's portfolio of graduate and undergraduate programs delivered from our Indianapolis campus. He also oversees projects for the Kelley School that drive innovation, outreach, economic development, and fundraising. Phil is also the Daniel C. Smith Faculty Fellow and has been with the Kelley School since 1996 as a faculty member in the Department of Business Economics and Public Policy. Between the years 2012 and 2016, Phil served as faculty chair of the Kelley School's online MBA and MS programs, branded as Kelley Direct. In both 2014 and 2015, U.S. News and World Report ranked Kelley Direct the #1 online graduate business program in the nation. Phil assumed leadership of Kelley Direct after serving as faculty chair of the Kelley School's full-time MBA program on the Bloomington campus. And in 2012, Bloomberg Businessweek ranked our full-time MBA program #1 globally in student satisfaction, career services, and teaching quality. Today, Phil and I will discuss the local economy in Indianapolis, where we are now in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and Indiana's significance as a global leader in the export of goods. We will also discuss business education and Kelley's experiential learning programs, which allow students to have greater impact in their local communities and around the globe. Phil, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely, Tim. Good to be here with you.
Well, on this Friday afternoon, I thought we'll talk a little bit about the economy and education, two things I know you love.
Absolutely. I think about those basically 24/7 or at least 23/6.
Oh, great. Well, let's start with this one. Well, where are we, Phil? What does the local economy look like right now? And what are some of the economic factors that might be strengthened as we move through this pandemic?
I think that the state of Indiana, Tim, is faring a little bit better than the rest of the country. Again, that's relatively speaking. There's still a lot of pain out there. But as a state, we are not as exposed in terms of the entertainment industry and the tourism industry. So actually our heavy dependence on manufacturing is saving us here, because with manufacturing, you have a more diverse customer portfolio because it's global. And also you can smooth out interruptions in production. Whereas with a restaurant, if you don't have any customers, you can't put meals in inventory. So you have to let all your workers go. So Indiana's holding up okay. I run a report. I run my own numbers about once every 2 weeks in terms of a forecast. And I'm sitting down, every time I sit down, I feel better after the exercise than before. So whether it's COVID data, whether it's economic data, it's always a little bit better than I expected. So I am cautiously optimistic. And the key is to follow the data instead of the news. The news wants to keep us in mass hysteria, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on. You got to watch the data and just realize that we will get out of this. And we're expecting, basically the expectation is the following. We're sort of in this middle of about 3 months of economic paralysis, which I expect to last through June. And that's just, nothing's happening, right? Just absolute paralysis, the deepest pain that we have felt since the Great Depression, depression. And then July, August, September, a sort of stop and start crawl out as we sort of come out of our caves. And we'll move forward, and then we might move back. You might have some areas that do a short reversal of lifting controls, and others that sort of spring forward. And then I'm expecting that once we hit October, November, we'll start to see the recovery that we're looking for. Now, this is precipitated on the assumption that our whatever second peaks that we see in COVID is going to be manageable. And that's a very key assumption, but there is, even on the public health side, there is some reason for optimism. So I'm feeling cautiously optimistic.
Good. You know, I felt like the SME sector in Indianapolis was really ramping up to do some amazing things before all this unfolded. Um, Maybe a question could go to how you're seeing the Indianapolis SME sector respond to the economic stimulus funding. But let's go back and say, what did it look like before all this cacophony started happening?
So the small and medium business sector in Indianapolis is well diversified. On one end, which are the folks that have been hit the hardest, you've got the tourism and convention business, right? So we punch above our weight as a region in terms of conventions and sports events. You know, they had to cancel the Big Ten tournament. So we've gotten hit really hard, and that's not going to come back for a while. That's going to be the last industry to come back. On the other end is we've got this high tech sector, which is actually, I think, in some ways, thriving in some ways as more and more businesses go virtual. And you know, at one point, maybe a year or two ago, we were the second fastest growing high tech sector in the nation.
Hmm.
So, but we're diversified, which helps to, you know, some places get hit, some places don't, and that gives us the resilience of the local economy. And we were in a renaissance. The Indianapolis was truly in a entrepreneurial renaissance, and we'll get back to that. But you know, a lot of businesses, even some of the high tech businesses, are like just they're in a state of shock, and they got to figure out how to survive and stay solvent. I think that I will give a shout out to our Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce, which was one of the first chambers of commerce to get out with a rapid response initiative. They were deploying loans and capital to businesses before there was any announcement of SBA loans by the federal government.
Mm.
And now the Kelley School is part of an initiative to help educate managers to make the right business decisions so that we avoid needless bankruptcies, right? We need to arm our small businesses and our medium-sized businesses in Indianapolis with knowledge. Now that maybe they've got access to capital to keep themselves afloat, they need access to knowledge and then good coaching to help them see this through a recovery. It's going to be, you know, the Federal Reserve's telling us we're not going to get back to the same level of economic activity for another 2 years.
Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you for sharing all that with me. Appreciate it. I believe Indiana was the 12th largest state exporter of goods in 2018, with a total number of over, I think, more than $39 billion. And that was a significant increase, I believe 48% from its export level in 2008. What are your thoughts about the specifics which have contributed to this growth?
I think, Tim, the expansion of our export base goes hand in hand with the expansion of our manufacturing economy.
Mm, okay.
We are the most manufacturing intensive state in the union. 25% of our gross state product is manufacturing. Nobody comes close to that. That's about double what the average state is in terms of share of economic activity. Now, this is not your old-fashioned manufacturing. This is advanced manufacturing, where our wages in manufacturing in Indiana are way above the national average, and they're way above what the average Hoosier earns. So, and what feeds that are a very diverse direction of exports. I think that's good for the state because it further diversifies the customer base of Hoosier businesses. And you know, as Asia reopens before North America does, that means businesses that are exporting are going to be able to take advantage of that and maybe grow earlier or recover earlier than businesses in the state that are just serving Hoosiers.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think it's tied back to manufacturing, but not just manufacturing in general, but advanced manufacturing, especially in high value areas, especially in biosciences.
Great, thank you. Well, let's pivot, Phil, and go in a different direction, talk a little bit about education, a topic you and I are both passionate about, certainly. And I've been a part of several conversations recently with private sector business leaders about the importance of relevancy in today's business school education. What are your thoughts about this statement? And why might we see the Academy become more engaged in experiential learning activities with local communities and local businesses as we move through and come out of this pandemic?
You know, Tim, in my history to higher education, which is more than 25 years since I was a grad student at Vanderbilt, never has there been a demand from our communities for higher education to prove its relevancy. The way that we prove our relevance or being relevant to the Indiana economy is more hands-on preparation of students for the workforce. And while there's no replacement for good foundational courses that give you the baseline knowledge and what you're going to major in.
Absolutely.
But as you get into your junior and senior year, we have to move forward and integrate more projects that put students on the front lines, that help companies, that help them solve real problems, and actually that put students in a situation where they have to take risks, and they have to communicate and sell their ideas, and they have to face criticism and perhaps failure. And they can do that in a safe environment that is education. You know, one thing I love about education is we're in the business of second chances. We want our students, whether they're freshmen in our X100, our business entry-level class on both campuses, or an MBA in their academy, we want them to fail a couple of times. We'd rather them do that while they're being educated, and they can be coached by sympathetic peers and professors, than to make their first mistakes when they're in the workforce. That's not only bad for their career, it's bad for the company, which makes it bad for the Indiana economy. So one thing that we're doing, the Kelley School is doing to sort of put our money where our mouth is that the undergraduate program on the IUPUI campus in fall 2021 will be transitioning to a work and learn program that better integrates internships and co-ops and apprenticeships like we've never done before.
That's some of the best news I've heard recently, Phil.
Well, it's a win-win, right? It's a win for the Indianapolis regional economy. It's a win for our students. They'll be better prepared to work. Not that, our Kelley grads do a great job, but the Kelley School, to live up to its brand name, we have to stay ahead of where everybody else is.
Right, continue to be first movers in the space.
Absolutely. And so we do that. We've done that across the board, and Tim and you and I have been part of that in many ways in the Kelley School. But this is just the next form of that. And I think it is in direct response to the demand from Hoosiers to say, hey, institutions of higher education, how you delivering value here, and how you proving that it's worth this tuition investment and this investment of state appropriations. So, and I hear them, student debt levels have never been higher. The cost of college education relative to income it's gotten higher and higher. So we've got to stand and deliver. The Kelley School has a great tradition of doing that, and we're going to do it in response to this question of companies, parents, students wanting more relevant work experience while they're in school, not just after.
Great. I'm excited to see what comes out of the IUPUI campus, Phil, here in the near future. I'm excited that you all are moving in that direction even deeper and more broadly. I spoke with Dean Kessner about the global landscape. I'd love to ask you about global perspective. Phil, why is a global perspective important to today's young people as they study business education at an elite business school? I know that you've traveled the world and you are a bright champion for education and relevancy and having a global perspective, but I thought it would be a good question for us to discuss. Why is so important, especially today?
Well, let me give you two perspectives on that. Tim, you and I were part of when the Globase program and the full-time MBA program got started. And the whole idea there was to take students abroad and work with real businesses, really real SMEs in challenging economic areas of emerging countries. And the biggest takeaway there wasn't the fact that they learned about another country. It was the fact that they went into an environment that they weren't familiar with, that was completely foreign, and in real time they had to solve a real problem. Failure was not an option. And actually that experience abroad helping a business that for which they may not even speak the language of the owner, then come back and get their Kelley degree. That experience abroad made them better managers here in the United States, right? Because they couldn't take things for granted. And that
Absolutely. And
broadened their innovation mindset. So I think,
yeah.
kind of flip this, global experiences are the best classroom for students, especially when they're action-based learning.
Ooh, I'm going to quote
And,
you on that. That's perfect.
but, but also, if we're a little bit more, and that's what the Kelley School's done really well.
Yeah.
Send our students abroad to solve problems on the ground so they can be better managers in the United States. Most exciting part of education of being here at the Kelley School in different programs and on both campuses. But to kind of get back to my practical insight earlier, as you mentioned, Indiana is one of the most globally integrated states in the country, right? You might be a plant manager in a rural county in central Indiana or southern Indiana, but your customer might be 10,000 miles away, and you've got to be able to appreciate that. Or you might have a global portfolio and have the cultural intelligence to work with your customers abroad from all different continents, but also to work with your workers who might just might have a very local perspective. That cultural intelligence is actually the most scarce skill among Fortune 500 executives. That's what they look for the most. So developing that cultural intelligence is actually the premium asset to give our graduates. And our students that go out and can prove that and leverage Kelley training for that, they can demand a premium in the labor market. It's not just about knowing about the world and knowing your geography and being culturally aware. It's about being culturally intelligent. And there's a big difference there. And that's
Yeah.
why it's so important at the Kelley School that we continue to innovate on our global side. And unfortunately, with COVID-19, that's probably going to slow that down because of the travel concerns. But we'll get back there soon.
Absolutely. And thank you, Phil, for sharing that. I was leading an alumni panel in San Francisco back in October of 2019. And when I put the question to the three leaders in banking, real estate, and social media, what one piece of advice would you help a young person studying business help them understand where they should lean in and really build out their skill set? And they all said that within the global competency realm, the global awareness, that global intelligence, as you cited, and have an authentic global experience, if not more than one, during your undergraduate and graduate degree experience. And the outcomes were exactly in line with what you just shared. And so I appreciate that, Phil. Thank you.
Well, just to add on to that, Tim, some studies say that the most successful Fortune 500 executives have had a management position. They've had 2 management positions abroad in emerging economies, not in developed economies, but in emerging economies. That's the minimum now that's considered for those type of positions.
Yeah,
It's a lot of global experience.
Yes, and I have been humbled by how I have seen business conducted in other parts of the world and certainly learned much from it. I'm also encouraged because when we come together and share our different experiences, they're better outcomes, right? And better learnings for all.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, Phil, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
It's so great to see you and catch up, albeit virtually. Everyone's opening their home to everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again. I wish you a great weekend and you and your family stay healthy, okay?
Thanks, Tim.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. That's all the time we have for this edition of Cyber Focus. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please let us know at CIBER, that's CIBER, at indiana.edu.